Welcome back. In this video series, we're learning how to design a piece of furniture using basic cabinet construction. In the previous video, we learned how to design a face frame and the cabinet box. In this video, we will be learning how to design the top and the base trim. Let's get going. There are two methods for building a top. The first one we're going to term grain match. And in this method, you make an oversized piece, you cut the edges off, and then you wrap those edges underneath so that you get a thick looking top. We call this grain match because in this method, when you cut those edges and wrap them underneath, the idea is that the grain will match on top and bottom, so it looks like one thick solid piece rather than two pieces glued on top of each other. Using the grain match method, we're going to measure the top of our cabinet and we're going to add 3 inches to each side that will overhang. So that includes the front, the right side, and the left side. We will not add anything to the back. After you've added 3 inches on each of those edges, that is the size that you will make that top piece. This particular cabinet measures 18 inches wide. So following this rule, we will add 3 inches to the right and left side, which will make our piece 24 inches in length. The thickness will be 3/4 of an inch. To find the width, we will measure from front to back on our cabinet. After we've glued the face frame to the box, that measurement will be 15 1/2 inches. Add 3 inches for your top, and that gives us 18 1/2 inches. Once the top has been cut to this full size, we're going to remove 1.5 inches along those 3 edges using the table saw. We'll draw a line to indicate where those cuts will be. The cut will be made along these dotted lines, and then those 3 pieces will then be folded underneath to create that thick looking top. The second method we'll use to build a top, we will term the trim method. Now don't get these confused. There are 2 methods. You only pick one. We already discussed the grain match method. The trim method requires you to make a top that is 1/4 of an inch wider and longer than your box. We'll measure the box again. In this case, the box measures 18 inches wide. That makes the length of our top 18 1/4 inches. The width of the top is determined by measuring front to back on our cabinet, which again is 15 1/2. Add 1/4 of an inch, we get 15 3/4. The thickness will again be 3/4 of an inch. After cutting this top, we're going to add trim pieces around the outside with miter joints to attach them at the corners. So for your trim pieces, they will be 3/4 of an inch thick, 1.5 inches wide, and we'll make them just long enough that we can cut miter joints and match them to the top. This is a rough length because the length will be found by matching it to our top and creating those miters. So for the 2 side pieces of trim, we're going to make those 17 inches long. The front piece of trim will be the same thickness and width, but we will make it 21 inches long. Those lengths, again, are extra long because we're going to be cutting miters on these corners before we attach them. The base trim is pretty simple. If you use the trim method to make your top, we're basically doing the exact same thing for the base trim, only a little bit wider or taller in this case. This right here is a profile of my base trim. So looking at the end of the piece, you can see the decorative edge that we will have. And then I've got my cut list. I'm going to need 2 pieces for the sides and 1 for the front. 2 pieces for the sides. They will be 3/4 of an inch thick, 3 inches tall. And this is the measurement that will change for you depending on how big your cabinet is. You're going to want to add 2 or 3 inches to the measurement of your cabinet so that you have some room to make those miter cuts for the base trim. In this case, for the sides, my cabinet is 15.5 inches deep. So I'm going to make the sides 17 inches long, and then I will need 1 piece across the front. It will also be 3/4 thick, 3 inches wide. The cabinet measures 18 inches wide. So this front piece of trim will add 3 inches to that to give room for 2 mitered cuts. And we get 21 inches for the length of that front piece of trim. So the base trim is fairly simple. 2 pieces, 1 for each side, 1 across the front. Add at least an inch or 2 for each miter that you're going to have to make on those corners. Okay, if you have any questions, send me an email or comment. An email will get you the quickest response. Thanks. Good luck.